Fortunately, she had a other engagement, but she is on the phone listening to the meeting, so at least she's hearing your complaints. And Commissioner Perno is running a little late, but he will be here, but I'm not exactly sure how long, but he said he will be here. We're going to start the meeting off by letting the developers explain what they're doing, and then we're going to allow the attorney to explain some jargon about the laws and everything, and then we'll get into the discussion phase. So, Doug, if you'd get started, we'd appreciate it.
But
Yeah.
we really need that for recording purposes, please.
How about now?
Is there a wire that long enough you can take? Is this long enough you can take this? Okay.
How about now? Hello, my name is Doug Crook. I'm a senior project manager, civil engineer with Panhandle Engineering. And I'm going to first introduce the project with some general information. I have heard some of the resident concerns from the last city commission meeting. So I'm going to address a few of those generally, and then I'm going to open up the floor to specific questions and do my best to answer them. So this is Andrews Plantation Phase 2. It is an extension of Andrews Plantation Phase 1. You're probably aware of that already. So we will now extend into the west with a house and roadway network that connects into Mowat Highlands neighborhood. The neighborhood is proposed for 84 lots, with all the supporting infrastructure that goes along with that, including utilities, stormwater management system, etc. I know drainage and flooding I heard that mentioned a few times in the city commission meeting, so I'm going to talk about that generally. The property drains naturally from east to west. It's higher at 389, it's lower the further you go west. So we've attempted to, for numerous reasons, continue that drainage pattern. As a civil engineer, we try to do that anyway. It saves a lot of cost for the developer, and it is more efficient design. Not only are we addressing the stormwater needs for the project itself, we also have to look at drainage that flows into the property from surrounding uphill properties. So we've got a drainage area on the east side of 389 that comes down the drainage system that serves 389 itself and discharges into the property and then flows around. So that we've addressed by a series of pipes and inlets and swales to get that water around the property. We're not changing that amount of water in any way, shape, or form. We're just redirecting it around our development to get to the same location that it goes to today. Now, as far as the on-site stormwater management system, we have to adhere to both local and state criteria for this design. And one of the primary design factors is that you are not allowed to discharge any more water in specific storm events. You're not allowed to discharge any more after the project is built than discharges off the property before it's built. Okay, that's a key design aspect, and we have met that with this design, as we are required to. Traffic was another concern. And again, you can feel free to ask your questions. I'm just talking briefly and generally up front. Sir, do you mind just hanging on? Let me get through the traffic real quick, and then. So that was one concern, traffic. All right, well, generally speaking, the more houses in a concentrated area, the more traffic there is in the immediately surrounding area. That's a given. Not a whole lot you can do about that. But there are things that you can do to help control that traffic and alleviate existing issues and try to prevent future issues. This is a small development, so there's not a whole lot of footprint that we can do a whole lot in. However, we have done a few things, and I'd like to mention them. For starters, there is a left turn lane from 389 into the property, which is going to be combined with, and you might not have known, but the county is going to add a center turn lane from the Andrews Plantation neighborhood all the way up to just before Aberdeen Parkway. So right now, anybody that's making a left turn, no matter which direction, you're holding up everybody behind you. Well, in this particular area, I know it's bad. I've sat in that traffic too. With this future turn lane that is proposed by the county, in addition to our turn lane that we're adding just for this development, that will help alleviate that specific concern. Another concern that I heard was traffic on Dundee itself. Well, residents, I mean, think about it. If you lived here, if you're commuting south and coming through the neighborhood, that's one thing. But I know most of the concern has to do with 389 and the traffic on 389. Well, folks coming out of Mowat Highlands and the new neighborhood, coming on to Dundee, a left turn is really the issue, especially on Dundee right now. If you've got to make a left turn, or if anybody making a left turn from Dundee to 389, everyone behind you is waiting. Well, that's because you don't have a turn lane there. Our development actually has a left and right turn lane. So while I heard a concern about this adding more traffic on Dundee, I actually feel like more residents in Mowat Highlands, especially those wanting to go south on 389, are going to come through this new development and make a right because we've got a right turn lane. So something to consider. What am I missing on traffic? Oh, yeah, someone mentioned the connection to Dundee itself. That's something that was required by the city. Whenever there is the ability to have more than one connection to a subdivision, they require that. Well, it's, for safety, access reasons, emergency services. They always like more than one way to get to any particular house. So, yeah, now's as good a time as any. Go ahead.
That's fine. Go ahead. If you could come up and use the mic.
Yes, would you move that, yes, in the middle, and then use that mic that
Hi, my name is Bob Doheny. I live at 1305 South Inverness Road. And I'm very interested in one of the things you're talking about. I've lived there for 13 and a half years, and water is always up to my fence line, which actually I own about 100 feet behind my fence line, and that's a swamp. I've been into that area hundreds of times over the 13 and a half years, just walking around back there. And you're saying that the water's going to run east to west. Got that. It's going to run into the area which we all cleared out about after the hurricane. Are you going to build that up, that area? Because right now I know it's a swamp. So I'm assuming you're going to build it up and push the water into the area where it's the drain off. Is that correct?
No, not sorry.
Okay. So what you're saying is there'll be no more water running through in back of my yard through the ditch that was cut out after the hurricane than what runs through there right now. What your plan is.
Yes.
Let me just show you where I live.
Yes.
This is my house right here, 1305 South Inverness. Here's the stream. That's my property line right there. And I see how you have the cutoff right here. And I'm assuming that's because of the runoff that's back there now that has a lot of water running through there. That's my main concern. I already have the water running to my fence line. I don't want it running up to my pool.
Okay.
And that's an issue. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Just put it back on.
Hi, my name is Jackie Hall. I live at 1223 Dundee, and my lot is on with the lift station. And since y'all have done Andrew Phase 1, which I did not know was occurring at this time. You're saying the water has not changed, but it has. And my concerns is now I've got a lot of water, and the lift station has been underwater too. And I brought pictures. Don't have them with me though. You got the pictures? Oh, okay. I had sent a letter, so y'all might have the pictures already. Yeah.
I have seen them.
So you're saying you're not going to be changing the water flow, but it's already changed from phase 1. So how can you guarantee from phase 2? I'm like him. I mean, the water is, I don't want water in my yard. So just standing there.
Okay.
And it's like a lake. It's not just like a little puddle. It's a lake. So.
I completely understand. So you've got a creek with lots of wetlands back here.
Yeah.
They call them wetlands because they're wet. They hold water.
And like I said, I've been living there for 20 years, and the lot, they've come out and they have, the land that you're wanting to develop on, they have, come through and, cleared it out and everything. So we've all walked on that land back there, and it was just mushy back towards the back, but not like it is now. So, and there's running water now going through there that used to never be there, that I know of. And like I said, we used to walk, and the people that lived a couple doors down, they had kids that had motorcycles, and they would ride their motorcycles all back there, and they didn't come out all muddy. So, okay, that's it for me.
You know what? I'm going to leave that one right here, and let me stop and answer the first two folks. All right, ma'am, starting with the first thing, Andrews Phase 1 discharges to the opposite direction. There's no water from this property that. This project has not started any Phase 2 has not started any construction at all, so there's. Phase 1 discharges. Phase 1 discharges northeast. That water from this property does not cross 389. This one here? Oh,
Mayor Pro
that
Tem.
one flows that way.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
if I may. My understanding is we're trying to create a recording of this, and it may even be live. When everybody speaks over everybody, we can't keep a complete record of what's said, so I would ask that we have
Yes.
one question at a time and allow him to answer them, and then we follow up as long as we have time.
And if you would, if it's your turn to speak, please come to the microphone. Go ahead, Mr. Crook.
So this pond does discharge at 389.
Chris.
So the pond on phase 1, it actually discharges right here to 389, but it's designed for a 100-year storm event. And as I know, I've never seen it overflow. It never has come over the overflow structure. So it contains everything from this development. And it does. So it would discharge to 389. But I don't think any water's ever even come over the overflow structure to even get to where phase 2 would be. You want to go ahead and talk about the backyard?
Yeah. So the first gentleman, you're next. And again, ma'am, this pond was designed to the same city and state criteria where it does not discharge any more water than this property discharged before development. So, sir, your backyard area in the creek. We will be filling portions of this property. Quite a bit of it will actually be filled. However, except for a few backyard areas, most of this will all go to the pond, which controls the discharge, specifically at a rate that is less than what it discharges today.
Sir, that's exactly my, I'm sorry. That's exactly my point, sir, that I'm already one of the yards that it goes up to my fence line, even though I pay taxes into the woods and into the water area. So if you're gonna have it where it's going anywhere, I'm assuming my backyard is gonna be one of those affected. And that's why I have a gripe with what you're doing, adding any dirt to it. Because the more you build up, the more the water has to go that way. Even out of your retention pond there, it can go there, but when it overflows, that's going straight into the pipeline there. So, I mean, you can speak with what you want on it. I've lived it. I've lived through a March many years ago when we had about 12 inches of rain in 9 days, and it was all over the place. And so you can't say a 100-year storm. I know we have those. Had the hurricane, had a lot. But my problem is when you say a few homes, buy the homes out, if that's what you're gonna do. If you're jeopardizing anyone's home, that's an issue for the committee.
By nature of meeting the stormwater design criteria, we're not increasing any risk of flooding or increasing discharges of stormwater.
See, and
That is inherent in the design, which has been peer reviewed for the city by a second engineer in town.
Yes, sir, I understand what you're saying. We live there. Lift up the land in that area, you're getting more water into our neighborhood.
Well, another factor to consider is after Hurricane Michael, the county and the city and others have gone through and cleaned out the major drainage channels throughout Bay County. So the water flow and discharge rates everywhere were affected by that, but it was for increasing the ability of getting stormwater to discharge through and out to final receiving waters, which for this area is North Bay.
Through McCain Creek.
Some of it does go through McCain Creek, absolutely.
Backs up to a majority of property.
Okay, again, if you've got a
Okay,
question, let's come to
sorry.
the microwave and use it,
Well, I
please.
want to address Yvonne Bishop, 1225 Dundee. I had done a lot of research off of, I believe it's the water thing, for phase one that was submitted, all the paperwork about the retention ponds. I did not bring the one sheet that showed the flow off of phase one. Half of it went to the back, and that's why there's that pond back there. Part of it, there's here, pre-development watershed, 12.76 AC, is that acres?
Acres.
Yes, okay. Pre-development water, and that's for pond one, which is the front pond. Post-development watershed for pond one, 20.77 acres. It has been added 8 acres from that property, which used to flow all out, is flowing into that pond. So when that is coming across, which is in the papers you guys have submitted, there is another chart that shows there's a northern tributary that comes from that pond under the 389 across this property, and this line goes right back across and behind Jackie and David's house at 1223 and 1221. And that is where the flooding occurred in September of 19, after you guys started development. And she has pictures of that around the lift station and his garage, and the creeks backed up. I know you can engineer everything to, I was going crazy reading some of this stuff. But if you've not lived there with the pre-flooding that we have, and now there has been a hurricane that has removed 75% of the trees in Mowat Highlands. I had four large oak trees. My neighbor had 5. We lost all of them. I have a half of a magnolia left. Everyone else, all the big trees are gone. What do trees do? They soak up groundwater, 50%. You have this land that is some trees left, and there, I should have taken a picture. There are pine trees sticking up that are absorbing water now for this, and there's wetlands. Yeah, it's not perfect, but we did know, we lived there, we've seen it. There has been more water since that phase one started. And then you're gonna fill that in, raise it, complete. When Mowat Highlands was built, there was trees. We had trees on our lot. I got to choose which trees to take and which to keep. I kept 2 in the back, 2 large in the front, oaks. I lost them. everybody's lost them. Everybody's lost a lot. I know there is a need for housing, but not at the expense of wetlands in a neighborhood that is built on wetlands, that had a retention pond that has not been maintained for years. If you look at the aerial flood maps, the last couple of years, there's no water in it. Your water shows there's no water in that. It's not been maintained. The drainage hasn't been maintained. So we have an issue. And so I understand development. I understand you guys want to, and if there was a way you could pipe that water from those things when, because we've had an odd year. We've had a odd few years. We haven't had that much rain right now, currently. We did in September. So it's hard for us because, my land's a little higher. It's only when your elevation maps, which I had looked at, it's 4.5 feet. For David, who's by the creek, it's 8.5 feet difference from the lot elevations that you guys have on your sheet to his lot land. And I don't know about the rest because we can only see the little bit we see right there because we're directly behind it. And I don't know about the Inverness. So it's just, the traffic's another thing. Honestly, Commission, I hope one day I have a thing that you could consider a back entrance because you have 320 homes in Mowat Highlands. You have 72 homes you've approved for townhomes that have 2 exits. Their entrance and exit is 1/10 of a mile from Mowat Highlands entrance. The entrance to phase 1 and 2, which will be directly across. Honestly, if you're going to go through with it, I would suggest if the county recently, last week, county said there's no money for widening or doing the 3rd lane. So that was news and encouragement. But if there's not a light somewhere for us to turn out onto that, a highway, you're talking, you got, okay, 24th Street.
Ma'am, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Okay, sorry.
no, I'm not saying stop. I'm just saying we've got a bunch of people. So
I know.
Yeah.
But, there's traffic. If you could do a back entrance out of Mowat Highlands, there's a way to connect it across Marlin Development land to Lynn Haven land across that little railroad to 26th Street, is it?
Yes, ma'am.
That goes towards the post office.
Yep.
Yes,
If
ma'am.
you could do that into
Yep.
Lynn Haven, you have all these residents. You have 84 with them. The new development's 84. What did I calculate? 500 and something citizens of Lynn Haven that only have access onto a major county thoroughfare. And no access to Lynn Haven. We have to take our life in our hands to try to turn out. So I'm sorry.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we go any further, before we go on to the next question, I want to let you know the commission is working. I actually met with the traffic engineers with the county last week to discuss 4-laning 389, which they said is not an option. Then I talked about red lights, trying to get a red light at Dundee or a red light at Landon somewhere along that road to slow traffic. They also told me that wasn't an option. Then I discussed with them possibly lowering the speed on 389, and they said the only way they would even consider that is if this commission makes a formal request to the county. I also, just so you'll know what you were just talking about, I've already talked to the city manager about this, about taking 24th Street and then extending it up to the railroad tracks, taking a left down to 26th Street. That way y'all will have a back entrance. I've already had that meeting with the city manager, and we're discussing that now to try to give y'all a back entrance. So the commission is working. We're trying to find solutions. As far as the stormwater in your subdivision, Mowat Highlands has a problem, and it is the city's problem. So the developer has a right to develop his property if he can prove to this commission that they can develop it without affecting your stormwater. That doesn't mean the city can't and won't address your issues. My understanding is we've already got some concerns moving forward in your subdivision with some stormwater issues. And I don't know if the city manager would like to explain, what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, it's working now. One of the things that I just want to remind you is that stormwater has always been an issue in Lynn Haven. And we have tried to address it year by year. And one of the things we did this year was we did put some money in stormwater so that we could address streets, not just one problem, but streets, Georgia Avenue, Vermont Avenue, all in those areas. We hear you. It is our job to keep you where you have a great quality of life. And if that means that we need to send out city engineers to work and try to solve your stormwater issue, we will do that. And so those stormwater issues that do not make in our grant application, I want to make sure that we can look at those stormwater issues with our public works director, with our city engineer, and work through some of these problems. So we will not ignore the problems that the city has to take care of so that development can go forward. But we surely understand your concerns, and we understand that we have some stormwater issues throughout Lynn Haven that we need to take care of.
One other thing that I've talked to the city manager about is possibly putting in a dedicated left turn lane coming out of Dundee to help y'all with y'all's traffic flow, since I couldn't get the county to consider putting a red light in. So, I mean, we are looking at alternatives, trying to find solutions to try to help. When we get back to the questions, if you would try to focus on one subject so that Mr. Crook can answer it. And when we get on it, when we get into 4 or 5 subjects, it's hard for us to follow and wait for his answers. So, sir, if you would please go ahead.
Well, hang on one second.
Okay.
I did have one other item that I wanted to talk about. And I'm not sure, you said you were by the lift station? Well, right now, that drainage along the north property line, this flow tends to come down to the creek along the backs of these lots. Right now, it's relatively flat, and there's no drainage system to speak of. It stages up and it flows as the water builds up. So it kind of has to build up a little bit to even flow towards the creek. We are addressing that as part of the design of this neighborhood. We're actually putting in a swale and then inlets and pipes in order to get that water quickly, without having to stage up, quickly out over to a lower portion of that 30-foot easement, so that it doesn't need to build up in order to eventually flow out of there. So that should help alleviate some of the issue on these lots, the backyard of those lots in particular.
Okay, sir, if you go ahead.
Hi, Robert Doheny Jr., 1305 South Inverness. You called it something important there. You said wetlands specifically. Okay, so these are wetlands. Wetlands are also federally protected, correct? All right. Endangered species. We also have the Panama City crayfish, which is localized only to this area. What kind of environmental impact or assessments have you done in this area? Because I've seen nobody.
There was an environmental assessment that was done that's required. There were no listed species found on the property. Just because there's wetlands doesn't necessarily mean that
No,
those
I've seen
species are there.
crayfish. Yeah, I've seen them.
But we do have to go and look. That is a requirement.
But
so
they're
we-
there.
So we had an environmental scientist go in and study the area per state and federal criteria. And we have obtained the state permit to take the wetlands. Now, we're not taking them all, but we are taking some, and our Army Corps permit is still pending.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Cindy Jeffrey. I'm at 1227 Dundee Lane. I'm the house right there on that side road that's going to be now used as an access into this new neighborhood, which I'm not happy about. And so therefore I also border the wetlands. I have a hard time understanding how removing the wetlands and building this new subdivision at a higher elevation, significantly higher than surrounding properties, is not going to compound the flooding issues that are already existing. When you've got the exterior perimeter of this new subdivision built up to 26, 27, 28 feet, and then the interior at a height of 32 feet, water will go downhill. And the water from the center, I understand, will go down to the lower properties on the edge, bordering this new subdivision, that are on the new subdivision. That then will trickle down into our property. I'm right there along the edge. I'm at a lower level. So I don't care how much water goes through a pipe that you've got set to go back into the creek or whatever, water is still gonna drain naturally downhill. And all of our properties are gonna be affected by that. So I have a hard time understanding how your plan is not going to, indicate that. I mean, I have a hard time understanding how that's gonna work.
Well, first, elevating property in and of itself does not increase the amount of water that flows off of it. The two are disconnected. Just because you elevate property does not mean more rain falls on it.
Well, of course not, but water, when it does, we have extended periods of rain and heavy rain, and that water has to go somewhere.
And that is the entire purpose of this stormwater management pond, to collect that water and then slowly release it.
So how is water down towards my end of the neighborhood going to make it all the way back to that retention pond before it travels down right there into my yard?
Well, right now, all of this area drains towards your backyard. We're gonna capture 90% of that and send it over to the pond, which will then slowly release it instead of going straight into your backyard. There's a system of inlets and pipes that collect that water and send it to the pond. The direction that it flows is irrelevant. The pond is designed specifically to slowly discharge the water.
Excuse me.
Okay, and then I've got traffic issues, but I'm going to wait until that time comes. Thank you.
Terry Brandon, 1401 Dunnett. And I had a couple questions on storm, and then I'll have some questions on traffic also. But you say that the phase one, none of that discharge crosses County Road 389, is that correct?
That was my mistake. A
Okay.
portion does discharge northeast, like I originally said, but I was
Okay,
not a
my-
design
okay,
engineer for
okay.
this, so that was my
Okay, well,
misunderstanding.
my question is, where does it go?
It discharges into the roadside ditch system of 389, which brings it to a culvert that crosses 389, that then goes into the Phase 2 property. We are picking that up in a pipe system and directing it around the southeast corner.
Okay, so the pop-off from the storm retention for phase one is piped to the stormwater retention back in the lower left-hand corner.
No, sir, it's not.
It's not.
It's directed around the Phase 2 subdivision. It
It's
still makes
directed
it to the creek like
Open ditches,
it's
open swales?
a portion of it is piped and a portion of it is open ditches.
Okay. And it eventually ends up in the stormwater retention pond? No.
And no, sir,
What happens to it?
it bypasses the pond. Initially, it goes into the portion of the wetland that will remain, which
Okay.
is a natural depression.
Okay,
So
that's-
that water will actually stage up in that depression
Okay.
and store some before it then discharges to a swale that continues along to the creek.
So that's going to be a natural water storage area?
It is today, and it will
Right,
remain.
and it'll remain,
Yes,
but
sir.
it's taking additional water from the pop-off of,
No additional water.
okay. all right.
Actually, it's going to receive less water because a lot of this property flows towards that depression today. That's now going to be directed around it and into the pond. So this depression will receive less water. However, it will stage to the same elevation that it does today to maintain the hydro period and the health of that wetland.
Okay, so we've got 84 units, 84 driveways, 84 roofs, and we've got a hard paved surface of roadway. Where does all that roadway runoff go?
That all goes to the stormwater pond.
To the stormwater pond. And it's naturally going to flow north, but the stormwater pond is south.
Well, the property generally flows westerly.
Okay?
It will
Towards
still
the creek, naturally towards
now
the creek.
now we're going to pipe it and make it flow southwesterly to the pond. The pipes will redirect it towards the pond.
Is this curb and gutter, or is it roadside swales?
It's curb and gutter.
It's curb and gutter. So you're going to have storm piping throughout
Yes.
the subdivision?
Yes, sir. There will be
with
back,
curbside inlets.
yes, sir. There will be backyard swales that are open swales, but the road drainage will be a gutter and inlet system.
Okay, so since it's naturally draining to the west and to the north, what I think I'm understanding here is that the elevation of the north end of the property is going to be raised?
Well, the majority of the property will be raised to develop the subdivision.
How much fill are we talking about?
It varies
Change?
from, it varies
Foot, 2
from
feet?
perhaps no change to maybe 2 feet, maybe 3 feet in some areas.
Okay, what, where Thurso intersects with Dundee, you've got, looks like a concrete swale along the backside. What is that in the stormwater drainage area?
That is road base. It's not pavement, but it's road base. That is to provide a better vehicular access to the lift station. An all-weather driving surface, if you will.
So it's a road. It's a road for
It
access.
is not an asphalt paved road, but yes, sir, it
It's
is.
a granular rock road to the lift station back there or something?
It's technically a driveway, but. yeah,
Technically a
yeah.
driveway? Okay.
If we could hold it down and then let the gentleman with the microphone talk, please, thank you.
Okay, that's the only questions I have on drainage so far.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Witt, 1401 Dunner Road. My question has to do with, were these water drainage studies done prior to Hurricane Michael? Was this a long-term plan that had been done a couple years ago, or is this taking into account our lack of trees? Because I did in fact lose 8 big 20-year established trees from my yard from Hurricane Michael.
This design was done after Hurricane Michael.
Okay, thank you. And the other concern I have with Phase 1 draining through those culverts to the opposite side of the street, we've already had a sinkhole form at that walkover where the bridge is. It took quite a while to get it repaired, but it's now traversable for walkers. But we have an issue with sinkholes that exists in Mowat Highlands as well. I'm sure the commission is aware of that. We've had numerous repairs over the years. But I'm also concerned about the underground water issue. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
That area of the walkway is going to be redone because that is where we are connecting to the culvert that crosses under 389 and then piping it around the subdivision. So that
Yes, sir.
area will be reworked.
Yes, sir.
William Swift, 1505 Dunnet Court. I'm not that concerned about the drainage in my area. However, except for where McCain Creek crosses Dundee Lane. Now, on a good storm, McCain Creek puts Dundee Lane underwater. You have to drive through the water on Dundee Lane on some of the good storms we get. Just a good afternoon. You know, good afternoon thunderstorm, McCain Creek floods across Dundee Lane. So I don't see how, you know, the water from the drainage pond, the water that drains through, I understand the piping and all of that that's going to run it to the pond. But if the pond is discharging, where's it discharging to? McCain Creek?
Yes, sir, to McCain Creek.
Well, McCain Creek in and of itself, without anything running down from where it runs from, and it runs from the bottom of this map, runs that direction, okay? And a good storm has it crossing Dundee Lane, and there can be 2 to 3 feet of water going across Dundee Lane.
The culvert under Dundee Lane is a known issue, and
Under Dundee Lane.
Sir-
it is one of the projects that was submitted for HMGP funding to be replaced with larger culverts. Not as a part of this project, but the
Right.
city has applied for federal grant funding in order to replace that culvert.
Yeah, the city's in the process of trying to enlarge those culverts underneath the road to help that situation.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Miguel Rivera, 1205 Dundee. So I think I heard you say that the subdivision has to have 2 entrances.
Yes, that's
Yes.
correct.
Where's the second entrance to phase 1? I only see one.
It's required if one is, well, if it's possible. A second one is not required if it presents an undue burden to the development.
Wait, so for phase 1, there was nowhere you could do a second entrance, and it wasn't required, but for phase 2, it was required to go through a whole nother
Well, let's,
subdivision without even consulting the people that live there.
2 things. Phase 1 is surrounded by private property. The city cannot take private property in order to create a public roadway. That's not going to happen.
Well, okay.
Phase 2, the roadway was already, this road was already stubbed out for future development. This was already here.
Mhm.
So the connection to 389 is a given. There's a adjacent public right-of-way, so a connection there is a given. Well, this was already stubbed out. It was already here. This is already public property that had the future intent long ago, even when Moen Islands was built, to connect to this property.
Mm. Okay. Well, as long as it was surrounded by private property. Okay, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm the city planner, and the city manager just wanted me to let you know something, just a bit of information. Where a property, if a property is a townhome property or apartments, there's a requirement that if it's over a certain number, if it's over 50, there has to be 2 entrances. If it's single-family homes, there is no requirement, but in the code, we do want to see interconnectivity so that there aren't as many entrances going out onto roads that, you know, could cause problems with traffic or whatever, busy roads. And so in this instance, it is possible to have interconnectivity, which is why they've designed the interconnectivity and the 2 entrances and exits. Thank you.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
All right, my name is David Hain. I'm 1221 Dundee Lane. And basically, if I can show you on the map real fast, it'll just be easier for me to walk on over here and take a look. Directly behind my property right here, this is me. There's that lift station right here. Here's the access road coming right down here right now. On the other side of that access road, they had dug a good-sized ditch. That ditch has, you know, been a lifesaver because it's cleared a lot of that water off. Since Hurricane Michael, some of the trees and everything have fallen in there, but it's still doing its job. I'm trying to figure out how much of this property will come back, and now are we going to be filling in that particular ditch that's on that side of the access road? Are we going to leave that ditch or dig it out deeper, or what are you going to do there?
So we are going to connect to the ditch at the far end here, and we're going to extend it up that 30-foot easement. It's going to be wider. It's going to be deeper than
So
it
you
is.
know exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly the
the
one you're
ditch,
talking
yes.
about, yes, sir. And the drainage that flows through here and gets to the ditch is now going to get into a pipe and inlet system, and that ditch is going to be expanded along that easement. So it'll still function the way it does, only now, roughly, none of this property behind my
Right.
hand is going to drain to it.
I hope that's
It's
correct.
all going to go to
So
here.
how
to the
far
pond.
would you be extending this ditch going back behind the other houses?
We are stopping the pipes and inlets at the road. So the ditch begins just
Okay.
after the end of the
So this road
driveway.
actually goes exactly up to the lift station, stops right there at the lift station, and then the rest of this is just like what is back there now, dirt, basically?
Yes.
And then they have it marked right now with like is that the center line that they've marked on that easement with those posts, or is that the edge of your property?
I'm not
Don't know?
certain, but if it's in the center, it's probably utilities that are located there. So,
I just noticed it basically outlined the exact property, and when they were doing surveys, how they marked the edge of the properties and everything like that, so I just didn't know where that's
there's
at.
a wastewater force main that goes through there. I'm pretty sure that's what they marked.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dave Sosa. I live on 1303 South Inverness. So the way I understand your project design, as you already mentioned, all of the water flows right now from east to west. You're going to try to force it into a retention pond. These homes all along Inverness and all along here, we received letters right after the hurricane that said that all of our homes here, we had now an increased breach, if you will, of the flood zone A, which you guys even try to require us to lift our homes. We all got the letters of doing that. And you're telling me that now that you're hardening all of the surface, as the gentleman said, with roofs, pavements, asphalts, and you're going to try to redirect the water into a retention pond, but it's still going to flow within the same jeopardy zone of all these homes that you already had mentioned we were supposed to raise after that. And I understand that you can control a bit of the flow, but all of this hardened surface will naturally still flow that way. Your retention pond that you've redirected now to the top of the flow that jeopardized all these homes is now going to evacuate down the same creek that we're saying was the cause of why these homes had to be raised. We've increased and bottlenecked the pressure up at the high point of where that creek runs. You can't logically tell me that that's not going to cause more flooding all along Inverness and Dundee. I don't understand that. I grew up as a land surveyor, and I'm trying to understand your design, and I don't get that.
Okay. Our design is not addressing off-site flows. We are only directing off-site flows around. I know. There's two parts to that. There's what's off-site that flows into it, and there's what's in it that flows out of it. The outside in, we're just redirecting around. So there's no change to the amount of water that's making it from off-site. Now the on-site portion, as I mentioned before, we are meeting state criteria with the pond design by discharging less water in a storm event than what discharges today. So if you get a 25-year storm event, right now,
Which we saw.
a certain amount of water is going to run off of this property.
We built, as my wife chimed in, we built our property 36 inches up, and we're still getting an infiltration of water back there. And by this hardening, flows more surface water, more capillary flow underneath it to fill that ditch more. And now this retention, you have now bottlenecked thousands of gallons of flow per minute down into the creek that floods us all out. That's my point.
The pond is a storage device.
But
So
you said it will outlet into this.
it will.
Yes. At what rate?
At a lesser rate. I don't know the exact numbers.
Well, I'll tell you this, without that pond, the current rate right now is enough to flood these homes, and they wanted us to lift them after the storm.
I can't address the current rate. If there's a current problem,
And that will exponentially multiply the problem.
well, that's what the state and local criteria is there for, to make sure that that does not happen.
And if I could just add one thing. So right now, with the traffic flow on 389 going up right now, you said there's 84 units here. How many units here? 72 and 84, 2 cars per unit. What, if you do the rough math right now, let's just look at this right now. You're adding 120 some odd cars, maybe more, 150 cars now that are entering a throat that's already backed up for miles. The reduction of the speed limit to that road will exponentially increase the traffic flow through here and make the problem even worse. Why even consider a subdivision here when the traffic doesn't support it, the traffic flow doesn't support it, you're not getting the funding to expand the road to allow it to happen, and you're jeopardizing homes here with a floodplain. Why even entertain a project there if the problems already that exist there are not supported by the current state?
Sir, if I may?
Yes.
The problem with 389 is a county issue. And we have, yeah, but we have gone to the county, and we've asked y'all to go to the county and tell them that road needs to be 4-lane.
Well, I'm not blaming you for the problem there. I'm just saying, why entertain a subdivision until the solution is there first, as well as with the storm drain?
You want a frank answer?
Yes.
A developer has a right to develop his property. Just because a municipality, just because of well, not because we're trying to understand the questions, but a developer has a right. Just because a county hasn't done their job or a city hasn't done their job doesn't preclude a developer a right to do what he wants with his property.
Right.
So.
Right, but the permits still have to be passed, and you guys have a say in the permitting of these places. And if right now the infrastructure cannot support the subdivision, Can water be even here?
Yes, sir.
My name is John Weber. I hear you talking about state criteria, and you're going to meet that, so everything's going to be fine. Okay, well, I live in this area, and right here is that little walkway, the path we have, and that's where the water runs over from this phase one, which I'm sure has met all the state criteria, correct?
You said you live right here?
Yeah, there's a little bridge right here where the runoff from this side of 389 comes over into this area.
Where do you live at?
I live on 24th Street. Yep, so I'm walking here. Now, I see, I am on 24th. Right, I'm on 24th. I'm on 24th over here. But this is where we're walking. This is the area I'm talking about.
Your property is upstream of this.
Yeah, I'm going to get plenty of your water. Did you not say that
You're-
you're going to run the water around your development, right? So who's that going to hit? Everybody around your development.
Well, no, sir. It all flows north. It gets to the creek and then it flows north. You're uphill. This is uphill. It's not going to flow uphill.
But I'm talking about something else altogether.
Okay.
I'm talking about the water from phase one that has met all the state criteria, comes under the road into that, there's a little stream right there.
Yes.
And we used to play, my grandkids and me used to be able to run up and down that stream before this was built. It would dry. We had forts back there. They built this, it's wet. You can't go in there now. I rode down 389 this morning, and I saw water in the ditch over here. Where is that water coming from? I have to believe somewhere over here, but the state criteria would say it shouldn't come from over there, right? You told us that they can't, you can't discharge more than you did before.
Right.
But before that was built, I never saw the water. This lady said her yard never flooded before that was built. So, you know, my eyes tell me something different. My common sense wants to tell me something different, but you know, can I prove that? No. But what I see. So I see that happening. I get to where, told you about that, let's see. You're going to, so this water's coming in here now that came from there, but they met the criteria. You meet the criteria, so okay, great. However, again, my common sense says this is wetlands here. When we get a lot of water, those wetlands will hold that water. You're going to get rid of most of that, and not only that, but you're going to build it up. So the buffer of all this right here is gone, and you're going to take that buffer, build it up, I think from 22 to 25 here, and from 26 to 32 here. So all this is going to be built way up. So the buffer that's in there now in those wetlands that holds that water,
It does not hold water. The only depression on this property that holds water is the one piece of wetland that we're saving. Just to clarify some wetland definition.
If you could step back and use the mic, we've got somebody complaining they can't hear what you're saying.
okay.
Because a piece of property is designated a wetland, it does not mean that it is wet or wet all the time or maybe wet ever. Sometimes wetlands are there because of the type of soil that promotes a certain type of plant growth. And in fact, soil types and plant types are how they define wetlands. It has technically nothing to do with water, even though they're called wetlands. But that's how they're defined.
That seems awful dangerous for them to define wetlands and them not be wetlands.
I don't make the rules, sir.
Yeah. So anyway, my point is, I believe that that's buffering water now, and you're going to take that buffer away and replace all of that with that little bitty pond, which appears to be smaller than the one on phase one. And they have 80 homes, and y'all are proposing 85.
Well, they have two ponds, and like Ms. Forehand mentioned, this one is for a different reason. This is designed to different criteria, which is why it's relatively larger.
Okay, well, what I'm saying is that one's smaller and working for more houses. It's that pond, the surface of that pond, when you dig it out, will it be the water table? Because I see the water table at 22 feet on my property.
The surface.
No, your development pond.
Well, we're talking relative, right? This one compared to this one?
No, now I'm just talking about your development pond. The surface of that development pond, what's the altitude of that thing gonna be?
The water elevation is 23 feet.
So you.
That's the groundwater elevation.
So that will hold from the groundwater elevation 23 feet. So when you get water into it, from 23 feet up to however high you build is the water it's gonna hold.
Right. It'll fluctuate from 23 to 26 feet.
Okay, so that's only like 3 foot of water then, huh?
That's pretty typical.
In that area, what?
That's pretty typical. 3
Okay.
foot of storage and dynamic elevation changes is pretty average.
Okay, so it's gonna meet state criteria. I'm just not, okay. What happens when it doesn't? What happens to all the people around when it doesn't?
When it doesn't what?
Meet state, when all of a sudden it floods everybody and say, whoops, it met state criteria.
That
Sir,
is
sir,
that is a
if I
great.
may, he can't answer what if. He has to design based on what the state tells him to design.
Uh-huh.
We do ensure that the ponds will hold a 100-year storm event without overtopping the banks. So there's numerous criteria that goes into it, but it's not just one storm. We look at numerous storm events. And they have to hold a 100-year storm, which is relative to a Category 3 hurricane. A 24-hour Category 3 hurricane.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, commissioners, neighbors.
Could you come up to the microphone a little bit better, ma'am? Thank you.
Yes, my name is Susan Anderson. I live at 1208 Dundee Lane. I've lived here for 20 years. I have an issue with water pressure. As you add these homes, I don't know that anything's being done about that issue. I'm also concerned about the flooding in McCain Creek. So one of the things I'd like to point out to the commission is that I don't necessarily see that we don't see improvements and expansion done in the city. I know that's where taxes come, but I also know we're all taxpayers and longtime taxpayers and voters. So what I implore upon you to consider is that as you approve new things, you can't forget that we need our improvements too. And sometimes these improvements need to come before we improve and approve the other things, to come before the things that we need to improve our areas before these building things. I know they're going to get improved because that's where the money comes to do the things that we need done. But if you consider our quality of life, our neighbors, the things we've been through with Michael, the things that are going on with COVID, these are things for our quality of life. I don't want to see my neighbors flooding. I don't want to see the line trying to get out to go to work in the morning when Bay Haven built. When the churches are building over there, we can't get out. And I don't want to see somebody die. I realize we say that's a county problem, but it's a quality of life issue. And my neighbors are suffering, and I don't want to see it anymore. So I implore upon you to consider what they're telling you today, because we are suffering, and he wants to build his neighborhood, but we need things too. So please consider what they're telling you.
Thank you.
I just have something for you, sir.
Oh, yes, sir.
I've heard you on a couple occasions say they have the right to develop. I totally believe that. You know, that's the way the country's run. They don't have a right to overdevelop. And overdeveloping in that area is going to affect us. And you, as the commission who are voted into office, need to understand that we are the voters, and you guys need to understand how we feel. Not make a comment they have a right. We understand they have the right. 84 houses in that area is too much.
Yes, sir.
I have two things. Matter of fact, I have several things. The water pressure, I like the lady has a problem with water pressure. And if it's not designed to upgrade the water pressure, then I don't know what's gonna happen with these townhouses. Okay. the developer does not have a right to develop his property. And I say that from the standpoint of the assistant city manager from the town of Glenarden, Maryland, who was responsible for authoring resolutions and ordinances to govern the town of Glenarden. The developer only has the right to develop what the council gives them the right to develop. They have no rights. They have no rights. They develop under the right that is given to them by the city commission, by the city council. And the city council can allow or disallow any development or anything that goes on within the city limits under the police power of the state. We have policemen standing over there. The same police power that the commission gives to this policeman, it has for every piece of property here to levy taxes. The county does that, but you have to pay for that. You know, they pick up your trash, you do all that stuff. All of that stuff is done under the police power of the state. People think that you are free. We're free to survive and to work within the police power of the state. My house was taken. I'm down here. The reason I'm down here, because my house was taken in an eminent domain taking. That's a power. That's the police power of the state. Came in and took my house. If I didn't,
just for clarification, sir, what city took yours? Because it wasn't Lynn Haven, correct?
No.
Okay,
no,
I just
no.
want to make sure we're understanding.
City of Baltimore. City of Baltimore. But it's available to you. Eminent domain is available to the city of Lynn Haven under the police power of the state. So I'm saying the developer has no power except that which you give him. All right? He bought the property there. He saw where he could make a killing with 84 lots there, with 86 other properties. You know, what's the value of those? What are they going to cost? What's he going to sell them for? How is the value of those lots and the houses on those lots going to affect the value of the residents of Lynn Haven who live around there? I'm looking at these townhouses, Landon's Landing, 72 townhouses. Come on. You know, we're looking at, we got people, I dropped $400,000 into a house. And I didn't drop $400,000 into a house to live in a neighborhood of $150,000 houses, or properties, or town, or apartments. That's not why I've been here 12 years. And so, you know, the property values, you know, are gonna be affected. What's the time frame in this? What's the time frame? When are they going to develop? What are we talking about? 2 years? 3 years? You know, that's too much development. You know, we can't sustain that. We stopped them from developing where this Landon's Landing, these 72 townhouses, we stopped that a few years ago. We came together and said, no, they were going to build a senior high-rise. I would rather have seen the senior high-rise than to see 72 townhouses. You're getting ready to change the character of the neighborhood. We did not move here to live in congestion. Most of us moved out here so that we could have some space, open space, freedom of movement, and get away from the congestion. I could have gone down into the city and taken my.
Sir, if you could wrap it up, because we've got
I
other people.
am.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm talking property values. I could have gone down into the city and found a place and bought a place for what I put down on this property. Could have bought a place and had no mortgage. You understand? But that's not what I wanted. I wasn't going into the middle of that congestion. And I don't think we want that type of congestion around us. It's going to affect our property values, and we just didn't move here for that.
Okay, we're going to allow these next two questions, and then I'm going to ask the commission if they've got any. These last three people are going to, and then we're going to let the commission do some talking. Okay, hold on. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Just a couple quick things here. I just had a question. I just want to point it out. Why is there this offset right here?
Chris, hold the mic for him when he's talking, if you would.
What's this offset right here with these two houses? Why is that pushed back?
Great question. You're pretty observant. That's a small area on there. The state asked us to do a little more with stormwater management. Some of the rear lot areas are difficult because of elevation to drain to our stormwater pond.
Yeah, that's my house on the opposite side.
And there's a limit to how much area in a development is not directed to the pond. So we were within that limit, but they asked for more. So they specifically asked it for areas where we could put what's called a vegetated natural buffer. In order to, it has nothing to do with stormwater quantity, it has to do with stormwater quality. So that increase, not even flow rates. The coverage is still going to be vegetated, whether it's somebody's backyard or, if it's grass or natural vegetation. But it's about having less developable area to have pollutants that come off a backyard, animal waste, pesticides, herbicides.
One of the other questions is, this is phase 2. How many phases are there? Because I see a lot more empty land, and right now you have 242 pretty much homes or something going up between Landon's Landing, phase 1 of this, phase 2. Are there additional phases?
This is a separate developer altogether.
I'm talking about you.
This is it. We're not aware of any other phases.
Okay. Because right now, 389 is a mess. You've acknowledged that. You say that's, the county's fault and that the developer has a right to develop. All right. I will tell you, I am an ER nurse. I deal with the broken bodies from people's car accidents on a daily basis, okay? People can't get out of there. We know it's a mess. So you are essentially doubling the number of houses in there in an area that already has logging trucks coming through that are overweight. We know that because we see them pulled over. You ever seen what happens to a small car and what happens to a person's body when it's hit by something that weighs 60,000 pounds or more than that? Okay? That, if you allow it to go through and you congest this further, I want you to think about that. That could be your loved one. That can be your friend, your family, that I'm trying to put back together.
When you contact, and this is for everybody, when y'all contact the county, that's another issue I would suggest you ask them, because right now that's designated a truck route. And I have personally asked them to take that designation away. And that's something I think each one of y'all need to reach out to your county commissioners and ask them to designate that a non-truck route.
Yeah, it's ruined the road, but you're increasing the congestion, and from what I'm hearing is that the only alternative is to put a left-handed turn lane on something that we have a hard time turning anyway, despite increasing additional traffic through there without increasing any sort of capacity. People are going to get hurt, people are going to die, and that's going to happen. So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jackie Hall again. I want to readdress the wetlands again.
If you could turn the mic down a little bit so we can.
I want to readdress the wetlands again. I think this thing's off. I don't think it's. I want to get to, okay. You're not the first developer that has brought a plan to us. You're the third one. Okay, the first one had said that there were going to be bigger houses, bigger lots, because of the wetlands. And so it was wetlands. Then they decided, well, we'll clear, remember I told you that that's not, because the tree issues and stuff. I've seen that land with just puny little nothing trees because they came out and they have cleared that before. There was a wet spot about where your writing is at for the address part, yeah. Back there that always had water back there. There was always, it might have been just a little bit of water, but it always had water back there. And they were said if they could get that to where it stayed dried for so many years, then they could develop back there. So they came and they cut a trench to the creek. That was their solution. And I did have water over the lift station one other time, and that's when we got a lot of rain and that ditch broke loose and water was just flooding across the lot. And that was before any of the other houses. My house was the first one in that area. So it's at a lower level. Mine is the same as the one is 1221 because I asked them if they were going to build theirs up because I'd be sitting in the middle. And even though you say water still stays in the same spot, it doesn't. It runs downhill or into if you have areas up here and you have an area down here, it's running that away. So, unless you've got it sitting this way. Anyway, so I just wanted to let you know, and y'all to consider that too, because like I said, it was wetlands. They changed it because they cut that creek, and like I said, there wasn't a ditch back there before, and y'all are talking about widening the ditch, which there wasn't a ditch back there when I lived. I mean, I've been there for 20 years, and it didn't come, I didn't even know it was back. Dave said they cut it because he was getting water in his yard, and that was after his house was built, which was, what year did y'all move there?
93.
In 93, and no, 2003, so that was 3 years later, so, okay, that's enough for me. So I just wanted y'all to consider, like I said, mine is, I don't mind y'all developing. I don't mind having houses back behind me because I'd rather have houses than townhouses. And I'd rather have 1 story versus 2 stories because I have a pool and everything back there and, so. And I'm going to have pretty much two yards in my backyard because our lots are bigger than those. It'd be nicer if y'all would consider doing bigger lots, but I can understand you want to make money, so. Okay, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. No, sir, we already said this was going to be the last question, sir.
Okay, but you are going to talk about traffic, right?
I'm going to talk a little bit about it.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Hi, I'm Michelle Roberson. I live at 1241 Dundee. 2 quick questions for you. This grassy square, is that yours?
No, ma'am.
We have no idea what's
No,
happening
ma'am.
there?
We
Okay.
don't.
And second question, I apologize if you explained this earlier, but does Quezon Drive connect with 389
Yes, ma'am.
for phase 2? So
Yes,
that
ma'am.
is
That's an intersection.
a second
Yes, ma'am.
exit or entrance?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. That'll
Boy,
be the main ingress and egress
okay.
point
Boy,
for
that seems like a
389.
great place for a stoplight. All right, thank you.
We thought the same thing. I want to talk about a few different things. My name is Chris Forehand. I grew up in Lynn Haven. I'm 47, and when I was 7 years old, my parents built a house on 24th Street that backs up to this development. So I've lived here for a long time, 40 years. So I understand this property better than anybody. I mean, I grew up before Mowat Highlands was built, before the first phase was built, before Dundee was built. And so I understand the issues there. I understand the stormwater. So when we were doing this design, I got really involved in the design to make sure that your guys' backyards don't flood. So what we did is we designed a ditch, let's just call it a ditch, and stormwater inlets so that it collects the water off of your backyard. And all that water that's standing in your backyards on Dundee, it's going to now collect that and it's going to run it straight down to the creek, okay? As I mentioned earlier, the city has got plans on Dundee where the creek crossing is to replace all those pipes. I feel like they're going to get the funding for that. That's going to come soon. One of the other ladies, she mentioned the water pressure. There's always been an issue with water pressure in Mowat Highlands. I believe it was about 6 months ago or so. We made a connection to the county system. You know, half of Lynn Haven's system is served by the county system, and the other half is basically, or the older parts of Lynn Haven, are served by the city's wells. The Lynn Haven is one of the only cities in Bay County that has their own wells, okay? Well, the older part of the city has older water pipes, okay, that are older, so they have to run their pressure lower. So what we did is we interconnected the county system, which is at a higher pressure. We interconnected it to Mowat Highlands and disconnected Mowat Highlands from the city's wells, which is at a lower pressure. So you should see a little bit higher pressure. You should see better fire flow. To talk about the fire flow of this development, we have a connection to 389. There's a 10-inch water main there. We connect to it with an 8-inch water main. We have 1,000 gallons a minute of fire flow. We actually are going to connect that 8-inch line to the line on Dundee, so that'll improve your fire flow, and it should improve your pressure. So I just wanted to tell you that, you know, I know you think because we're building this property up that it's going to flood you, but that's not the case. What's going to happen is we're going to collect all this water that's now sitting on this property that runs to the creek, runs to your backyards. We're going to direct it to a stormwater pond. Everything around us we're going to collect and take directly to the creek. So you should see an improvement. You really should. And I just can't stress how much we put into this to satisfy the city, to satisfy the city's review engineer, because it's always an issue with infill development of stormwater that, you know, it collects it, you know, and it basically stages up. But we're trying to improve that for you. And we're taking all of the water around us from on the south end over on 24th, we're taking it all the way to the creek. And on the north end, all these lots along Dundee are all going to go directly to the creek. And everything that we're building on here on this development is going to be collected in our stormwater system, brought to this pond, and staged to a 100-year storm, and then discharged to the creek. So it's going to be a lot slower, which you don't have a pond there now. So I hope I've answered any questions about the stormwater, the water line question earlier, the pressure. To talk a little bit about traffic, right now, if you live in Mowat Highlands and you don't have this development, you come out of Dundee and you want to turn right, but you got somebody in front of you that wants to turn left. Early in the morning, everybody's going to Bay Haven or school or whatever it is, and you have to wait and wait and wait. If you put in a right turn lane there, which is something we've talked to the city about, then that gives you the opportunity to go on up and turn right, okay? It's a lot easier to make that right turn than it is to make the left turn because you're dealing with two opposite ends of traffic direction. So I think what's going to happen is you guys that live in Mowat Highlands are going to actually use this entrance, this new entrance. Number one, especially if you're going south, because wouldn't it be so much easier to turn on this new road, come down to this entrance and take a right because you actually have a right turn lane. If you're coming to your development, if you're coming back to Mowat Highlands from the south, you're now going to have a left turn lane where you could turn in this way. So you could come in this new entrance before you ever get to Dundee. Sure.
So if you're guaranteed,
I think you have to come up, sir.
Yeah, it's for the internet. It's for the internet watchers.
If we have the guarantees that water diversion is working as effectively as it's been designed, and you're saying there's going to be actually less flow through that creek because of the retention pond, and that the hardened surfaces are not going to be affecting the capillary flow as well as the surface flow into that creek, which, by the way, that creek was 50% into my backyard during the storm, okay? So if you're telling me that the creek is the answer, if your design is going to work that way, how are the new flood zones going to be developed? And will that decrease our necessity to have flood insurance in those areas then? If that's a guarantee of your design, that we don't have a concern anymore of any of that creek water coming into the backyards in Dundee and Inverness, are you guys reassessing your flood zones?
Just so you know, the federal government does flood zones.
Right, but
not
your
the city of Lynn
submittal
Haven.
on the elevation, the flood is what they use. It's your data that they use, as well as their geodetic surveying that produces those maps. Are we going to be having a redesignation of flood zones to show and guarantee your designs?
Now, I may be incorrect, but the city doesn't provide anything to FEMA for their flood zone rules. Am I not correct, Chris?
Well, we did have to establish base flood elevations.
Yes, you
will
do.
not affect you.
And the
It would
geodetic
not.
survey that feeds up into that is what designates the flood zones. So if that's the case, that we will not have, not only will not have an increase in flood potential based on the water flow you're flowing into the creeks and the retention pond, that means that our elevations now should be suitable, because if we look at mean sea level, our elevations down there should not be getting flooded. The reason we got flooded is because the lack of flow in that area and the lack of drainage, which we've now increased the flow from the retention pond. And I understand your opinion as a civil engineer and saying that you're gonna retain that for a 100-year flood, but I'm telling you right now, that bottlenecking into the north of that, where it flows in that direction, you're gonna increase the flow into that. That's just a natural thing. That's just what water does, especially, as the gentleman said, with roofs and pavements. So if that designation of that elevation is done to the point where now that water will evacuate faster, or there'll be a continuously less flow into that creek, then those elevations need to be redone. And therefore, the letters that we got from Lynn Haven asking us to raise our properties, all of that stuff is null and void now anymore. And this whole flood designation program is all null and void anymore. Is that what I'm understanding from you guys?
What letters are you referring to?
We got letters from Lynn Haven telling us that right after the storm, that, hey, you're in this flood zone, and if you're not 50% reconstructing of your home, you have to lift it by 36 inches because you're in flood zone A.
Okay. That's a FEMA requirement.
Well, no, it was Lynn Haven requirement. The letters didn't come from FEMA, they came from Lynn Haven.
Okay.
Terry Brand again. Question on the flood maps, the FEMA flood maps.
Yes, sir.
What is the date of those flood maps?
I'm not sure. 2009? Yes.
2009?
Yes.
Have they been revised or they just reissued?
It's my understanding they have a draft map that they've not approved yet. It's not effective yet.
Okay, the flood study is based on those maps or the 1955 FEMA flood maps that we've been using for years and years and years and years?
The pending map change,
Pending map changes.
right, it's
Okay.
still a A zone.
Okay.
Even in the pending change, it's still a A zone.
Okay.
I think the elevation the elevation that is designated for the portion that's downstream, I think that does move upstream a little bit, and they give it an elevation.
Yeah, and all those flood maps don't reflect any road construction, any new subdivisions, any of that development that's in there right now, that 1955 FEMA flood maps.
Well, they do incorporate a development that has been done since the prior map change.
They've never updated the maps since 1955. FEMA.
Well, the last one was dated 2009, and there's
thought you-
another pending change that's coming.
It's a 2009.
Yes, sir.
It was a complete map revision in 2009?
Well, just because they do a map revision doesn't mean every flood zone
Exactly.
changes. So
Exactly.
if they warrant enough changes in
What-
one area of a map to issue a new map, then those areas will change, but that doesn't mean it changes everywhere.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, there's not a whole lot of confidence in these flood maps from the government that were issued in 1955. And I don't think they really reflect the current conditions that we've got out there.
Well, if it's an A zone, that means there's no elevation determined, and therefore, there could be some error in the delineation.
Right.
By its very nature.
Very possible. Okay, another question here. Out there at the intersection with Dundee and Thurso, you've got, is that curb and gutter that runs along your development out to Dundee? What is that depicted there?
No, there's no curb and gutter along that existing
There's something
roadway.
here. What is that line? What's the designation?
There's a sidewalk there.
Oh, there's a force main. This here. What is that?
That's a sidewalk.
And this here.
It's all sidewalk. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And the other question I have is out here at the intersection with Dundee and 389. I'm the guy that's turning left.
Shouldn't tell people that.
Sorry, guys. Turn right and keep turning right until I get where I'm going, right? Okay. But I'm the guy that wants to turn left there, and I've got all these people behind me, and now, when the county builds this road, you guys aren't going to build the road. No, that's not a part of your development.
Not all of this change along 389, no, sir, it's not. We are adding a left turn lane on northbound 389.
Right,
into
but
the-
you're not doing anything up here on Dundee Lane where I'm backing up all this traffic?
Not as part of this project, no.
No, okay.
We just wanted to show that because I know the traffic was one of the main concerns here.
Yeah, but we've got a big problem there, and if this is the solution to put in a turn lane, now as I'm making a left, I've got to look at 2 lanes of traffic coming towards me, and I'm scared to turn out and go left.
Well,
Just so you know, sir, that's the county doing that. That's already in the county drawings. That's got nothing to do with this development.
Yes, sir,
They-
I understand that, sir, it's the counties, but you as the city commission of Lynn Haven represent the citizens
Sure.
of Lynn Haven, right?
Yes, sir, but
So
we
you
have-
should be concerned with our concerns.
Yes, sir,
Thank
but
you.
we can't tell, yes. But like I explained to you a couple of minutes, or at the beginning of this meeting, I've already met with the county, and everything I've tried to alleviate with this problem, they won't listen to me. You know, so this is a county road, the county says they're putting that turn lane in. So if they won't listen to me, I would recommend you call your county commissioner and have a talk with him.
Okay, so if you approve this, then
No,
what
no,
hap-
no, this road's not approval for us.
No, I'm talking about the subdivision. If you approve this, we've got 1 wrong already, and you're adding another wrong. 2 wrongs don't make a right. I'm turning left.
I just wanted to let you all know something about the stormwater. So not the flooding that you've been talking about with the floodplains and, you know, whether it's an A or an X or whatever. But I wanted you to know that these people here are the engineers who represent the developer. So they are the people that submitted the plans, the site plans. When we receive site plans, we send them out to a reviewing engineer company. We sent them out to Dewberry, and Dewberry are tough. And they reviewed them, they made them make some little tweaks and changes to ensure that the stormwater will work. And nobody from Dewberry is here tonight, but when this comes back to the commission for another public hearing at the city commission meeting, I'm not sure when that's going to be, but Dewberry will be there, and they are the ones that reviewed these people's work. So I just wanted you all to know that, okay?
I wanted to start by finish up by letting y'all know, thank you for coming, and we appreciate you having concerns. Okay, we're done with the public commentary, but I know the city attorney wants to tell us a little bit about the laws and requirements.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And this is for the commissioners. I provided you previously the Lynn Haven, Florida Code of Ordinances related to development order and Florida statute. A couple of things I'd like to point out is tonight there was no sworn testimony provided. When we have a public hearing, that will be publicly noticed as it was previously. There'll be another publication sent. Ms. Richard will follow all the Florida statutes for that. There will be a public, what's known as a quasi-judicial hearing. Fancy word just to mean that it's supposed to be more formal, and this commission will act as a judge. And what they are judging is whether for approval with conditions, or denial. In the case of the evidence that they hear or see, their decision must be based on competent and substantial evidence. In this case, there may be engineers, there may be individuals with photos, there may be just testimony, there may be written letters, but it has to be under oath, and whatever decision made by this commission has to be based off competent and substantial evidence by our own code. In addition, Florida statute requires that if the municipality were to deny a development order, that they must put in writing to the developer the applicable portions of the ordinance, rules, statute, or other legal authority to base that denial off of. So that will be important. Today is for enlightenment for this commission and for the developers and for the public, but it is not what the commission can rely on. What they can rely on is what is at that hearing, similar to a judge. He may hear a lot of things leading up to a hearing, but in a trial where he's going to be the decider of fact, he's got to rely on what is presented at that time. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Mr. Albritton. Does any commission, we're done with the public commentary, ma'am.
If you have this meeting, is it going to be like last time's commission meeting where only a few people could be there, or is it going to be in a place like this
Ma'am, that'll be up to the city manager and the mayor. I mean, we can't make those decisions at this meeting, unfortunately. So, yes, ma'am, thank you. I'll give a chance for any of the commissioners that'd like to make a comment. Mr. Commissioner Perna?
Thank you. I would like to, I've been watching online too, and there's a gentleman out there named Gary Oxley, and he made a couple comments. He first commented and said, support us in Mowat Highlands until county gets 389 upgraded. Say no to this and additional development. You have the authority. And then he just chimed in and said he made a comment about us as commissioners don't approve the project if the county won't listen to us. Well, I wanted to tell y'all, and I hear you guys, and I know what roadblocks you're telling us you have as far as this coming in. We got a few breaths left in us with the county, I think. I serve on the TPO board, the Transportation Planning Organization, the Florida DOT, the county. We all meet and speak about the road projects. Usually they talk about things that are in the future. And I know they have a future for 389 and what they want to do. What we need to do, and I know Mary Anderson, myself, we sit on that board. We'll go there and we'll tell them that we need to look at any projects they have for 389 and to move them further up toward the present based on this. So that's what I want to tell you guys, is that I want to fight for you at the TPO, and hopefully we can get something going with what we've already established our needs are for 389. So that can help with the traffic. And I do believe the back entrance, if we can work that too, that'll really take a load off your traffic, because a lot of you would shoot out the back way up 26th Street to the light at 77 right there. So I'm all for you having that back entrance, trust me. So those are the two things I wanted to mention. Definitely hear your concerns. I hope the building, the soundness of what the structure, the piping, the inlets, the fortification of the lift station, and hopefully the fortification of the culverts at Dundee and McCain's Creek make things work for you guys. I really hope it turns out to be a win for everybody. Timing is the key. So if we can get the traffic stuff moved up and everything come through, I think, you know, it's a big speculation for y'all. Y'all live there, and I hear your concerns. So let us try to fight the county and get the traffic worked out. I know the engineers. I hope it all works. I just want to thank y'all for your time. So thank you.
Commissioner Aldridge.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. You know, first off, I want to thank all of you guys for coming out tonight. It's the American way. Come out, voice your concerns, okay? So I'm all about that 110%. The only other thing I would say is I would remind everyone that we do care. I promise you we care. The county cares. I can tell you they do care. We're all neighbors. I live over in the Hammocks, not far from you. My office when I started was over at Train, so I know the traffic issues of getting off work or whatnot and trying to get out onto that road. So I feel your pain, I really do. And I just want to put out there, though, to remind ourselves, again, it's easy to get angry at the people at the table, but we're here to help. We're here to help. And I promise you, if you call us or you email us, we're here advocating for you. That's why we're here on Thursday nights, to advocate for you with the county, the state, anybody else that we have to. We're on your side. So thank you guys again for coming out. Keep up the good fight, and you know, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
We do hear you, and we want to try to make a win for everybody, I swear. And I'm sorry I was a little late. I somehow I thought this was, I put in my calendar for next Thursday. I was on my way across town, and I got here as soon as I could. That's why I was wearing shorts and a polo, but I was just glad I made it. So.
Commissioner Tender?
Yes, thank you. I had a couple of questions, and one for either Doug or Chris. But is there any reason why the retention pond, is not larger? It appears that there's a lot of extra property right there.
Well, we are preserving, and I forget the acreage, but we are preserving the highest quality area of wetland on the property, and that's the area that we're not touching.
Okay, so that's to the right of the pond.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the other question I had, and I think this is probably addressed to Bobby, but is that creeks in that area in Mowat Highlands, are they city easements? So we're not responsible for keeping that cleaned out? Those. Okay. Okay, I just noticed when I was there, driving around yesterday, that the creeks, I think this McCain or whatever creek you were all talking about, that was one of them. There's a lot of trees and stuff down in there. So that was my one question. And then this is for our city attorney. I just wanted to ask, if this plan, because it sounds feasible and, I mean, it sounds like it makes sense, but then on the other side, it's like I'm going, how can we make water run uphill? And I'm not a contractor, I don't know anything about that. But let me ask you this, people who live in that community have any legal recourse if they build this development as is, saying all this is going to happen and it doesn't, and they're all still floating in water? Do they have any legal recourse?
Private landowners have a duty to ensure that they're not damaging adjacent landowners. So you're asking a very broad question. It's like if I walk down the road and get run over, do I have recourse? Well, it depends. Was I drunk or was the other person drunk? There's a lot of variables to that question.
Yeah.
That being said, if it's an individual who does nothing except for receive damage, there's typically in the law recourse, yes. That's the best answer I can give you.
Okay. I mean, obviously, it would have to be more than one person, but
not necessarily, no,
okay.
ma'am. One person that receives an inordinate stormwater drain or trees or debris that comes off, certainly it doesn't require a class action necessarily. But certainly if there's recourse, if an individual's property is damaged due to an individual landowner's negligence or carelessness.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
and then do you know when this project is going to be completed? I heard somebody ask, but I never heard the answer.
I think they're planning on starting construction like in a couple months after they get the permits.
Okay. And how long will it take, though? A year or two?
Probably
or
6 to 8 months.
Oh, okay.
We still, I didn't get the answer.
6 to 8 months.
Yeah, but we talking?
They'll,
22, 23, 2021,
2021.
If you didn't hear, he said it would take 6 to 8 months to complete once they start. So, and that's after everything is approved.
That's the development of the land, not including the homes.
right, that's roads and
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Right, okay. I just want to make sure, that we're clear on that. Ms. Gaynor, I'm sure you got something you want to say.
Before we close tonight, the mayor just wanted me to let you know that she heard all of your comments and would be taking them in, and that we would be having another commission meeting in the next 2 weeks. Yes, it has to be public notice. I can't give you a firm answer whether or not it will be here or not. I will let you know that the city will follow the guidelines of the governor and make sure that we are social distance and that we do not have crowds more than 50. So I'm trying very much to keep everyone safe. And so maybe it may be, if we can't have it here, that we can have representatives from the development and make sure that when we do have the meeting that we have people in place. But I will let you know, because to get this building here, it means that we have to go through the school system. Our next meeting, she has to public notice it at least, I think it's 10 to 14 days before you can public notice.
I just wanted to let you all know that our public noticing requirements for the plat and the development order are set out, well, for the plat in statutes, and we have to put the notice in the newspapers, which we did. But I know that some of you at the commission meeting were saying that you expected to see something on the property, which is why we put a notice about the workshop on the property. We don't have to, but as a courtesy to you all, when we know when that meeting is going to be, I'll make sure that there are notices put on the property so that you know.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and I thank you for all that you are, and we want the best quality of life for you.